Well, good afternoon. I always struggle with what I'm going to wear when I have an opportunity to get on stage. And, I walk in this morning and I see Kimberly in beautiful green, my friend Christy in the black and beautiful royal blue. I saw Linda up here, just her orange was fantastic. And my closet has two colors, black, and I wish it were black. It's a real struggle. So I'm really excited to be here. And I want to start by just echoing what Colleen said to you all, which is just, thank you. Thank you for letting me be here today. Thank you to ClassLink. The sponsors, some of them get time during this conference, and ClassLink so graciously gave their time to me. Not only did that, but they also gave each of you a copy of my book. And so thankful, ClassLink, for you to do that. I was not only a professional user of ClassLink for all of my students in my district where I was superintendent, but also personally, she is just a gift of a human being. So thank you so much. I wanted to talk with you today in just a few minutes that we have and share a little bit about myself and then focus on just one thing. And I'll say this first. Yes, I am from Texas, but to all my New York friends in the room, I'm actually from upstate in Western New York. I grew up in a small town outside of Rochester in Churchville-Chili, graduated from a small town outside of Buffalo, East Aurora, and then went to the University of Pittsburgh in Pennsylvania, and then made my way to Texas. In Texas, I had the opportunity to serve in public education for 25 years. Started my career as a paraprofessional, a teacher, a coach, a campus leader, a district leader, and then had the amazing opportunity to serve as superintendent for almost 10 years. I loved my work as a superintendent, and to leave that work was really, really difficult. The last thing that I love are these two kids right here. My daughter's going to be a sophomore in college. She goes to school at Suffolk University in Boston. And my son is going to be a sophomore in high school. And so they definitely keep me busy, but just incredible, incredible kids. So with our time today, I really wanted to talk about just one thing. If there was one thing that I could talk with you about, it would be this. How do we live a life, both professionally and personally, that just goes above and beyond what we could ever even imagine or hope for to be true? I titled it, Breaking Free from Fear and Doubt to Walk into a Bold and Brave Life. And when I've researched failure and fear, which is probably my two favorite and most disliked subjects out there, there's a lot of similarities between the two. And failure is, it's painful, right? I've had some epic failures. Like the first time that I applied to be a superintendent, and it was a colossal failure, right? I've had small failures, like the conversation that I had that was really important that went off the rails or went too far or didn't go far enough. And when we have those moments, we learn from them and grow from them. They might be a private mistake, they might be a public event, but failure is an event and it's finite in nature. But fear, that constant what if? What if I don't meet expectations? What if I'm not successful? What if the worst possible outcome comes to fruition? That fear can paralyze us in our work and in our lives. I was in church one Sunday morning, and the pastor was talking about that when you're on mission for something, that there will be things that come along the way that try to derail you from that path. And he was, writing or speaking those words, and I was taking notes, and I wrote down these words that our mission sometimes walks us through the valley of the shadow of doubt. Well, I don't know if anyone's a biblical scholar in here, but it's not the valley of the shadow of doubt. It's the valley of the shadow of death. But what happens so often for us is that our fear leads to doubt, and that doubt leads to inaction, and that inaction leads to death. Like we doubt and don't act, and doubt and don't act until our greatest hopes and dreams might as well be dead. And that's fear, and we can't let it take hold in our lives. When I get to this place of fear in my life, the quote that always comes back to me is, courage is not the absence of fear. It's the ability to act in the presence of it. So how do we do that? How do we act in the midst of fear? I've researched, I've listened to books, I've heard from speakers. I even put the words into Google one time that was like, literally, how do I get rid of the fear? And this blog came up by Seth Godin, who I think is brilliant, and I was like, this is it, I'm gonna find the answer right now. And he begins the blog with these words, alas, this is the wrong question. And I was super disappointed. He goes on to say this. He said, the only way to get rid of the fear is to stop doing things that might not work, to stop putting yourself out there, to stop doing the work that matters. So let me just ask if there any part of that is okay with any one of you, that we would stop doing the work that matters. Seth would agree, and he goes on to say, no, the right question is, how do I dance with the fear? You see, fear isn't the enemy. Paralysis is the enemy. That courage looks like when you act in the midst of fear. So what does that look like for us? Because if the goal isn't to eradicate fear, but to walk, to act, to lead in the presence of it, what does that look like for us? Well, I'll tell you the first thing, which may not be the most inspiring thing, is to expect it. I wish that I could say if you did X, Y, and Z, that your life would look like the picture on the left. And we know that that's not truth. Yet we will do anything in our power to avoid that picture on the right. But success is not a destination. It is found in this journey. And this journey is not some fast path to greatness, but this rugged trek through places like failure and fear and disappointment and missed opportunity. When we think about our journeys, we have to remember that just because we're not moving in this seamless straight trajectory that we had anticipated or hoped for, that doesn't mean that we are not fully equipped for what's to come. But because we know what is to come, which is that this work is hard and this work is messy. And because of that, we have to understand that that feeling of being overwhelmed, that feeling of being inadequate in a situation is part of the growing process and not a sign that you are not perfectly equipped for this job to which you've been called. When I think about fear and our journey as leaders, I know this to be true, that sometimes places like failure and fear and faith are the very places from which greatness, hope, and success are born. So I want to talk to you a little bit this afternoon about how do we lead in this work. I talked a little bit about that we need to expect it, but I also think that this is true, that fear doesn't always mean that you're not ready. I don't know if you're like me, but someone asked me to do something. I feel this call in the deep part of my soul to do something, and immediately that's followed with that feeling of doubt, of angst, of fear. And there's this reaction that we have sometimes to think that those feelings are a sign. Like that must be a sign that I am not ready for that which I've been called. Like I'm just gonna wait for all of those feelings to pass, and once they do, I know that I will be perfectly equipped to step forward in that. But that's not truth. I have the opportunity to lead our aspiring superintendents each year, and I always start with this slide, a slide of confession, if you will. If we're really gonna talk about the things that kept me up at night, as I was contemplating this move into the superintendency, these were those things, that I didn't feel like I was ready. And by the way, you're not. You're not ready until you actually sit in that seat because you've never been presented with the things that you're gonna be presented with. And then for those of you who are new in their role, 1 or 2 years, you think you've made it a year and you're like, yes, I am ready for what is to come. And then year 2 happens and you're like, I was not ready for that, you know? I also didn't wanna move. It's a hard part about this work for many of us at that highest level where we have to uproot our families for this job that we don't know if we're ready for or if we even like. And I didn't know that I would like the work. I knew enough to know that it would be meaningful and impactful, but I also knew enough to know that the work could be hard, even ugly at times. But I think the thing that I struggled with the most was this last one, that I didn't know if I could balance being a mom and a superintendent. I showed you that picture of my kids on the first slide so that you would understand the picture on this slide. That when I became a superintendent, my kids were 2.5 and 7. I had a lot of mentors in my life. I had a lot of role models in my life, but none of them looked like me as a young mom trying to do and lead this work. It made me question whether I could do it, but even more so, it made me question whether I should. But all of that is fear. And the thing is, I didn't wake up one morning and say, oh man, all of those feelings are gone. I am ready to walk into this bold and brave life that I've been called to. What happened when I was faithful in just taking that next step after next step after next step? Jen Hatmaker is one of my favorite authors and speakers, and she asked this question in a session I was at a long, long time ago, and she said, is your yes even on the table? And let me be clear, I know that's true for you because you wouldn't be sitting in this room in the jobs that you had that not been true for you. But I also know, even in the conversations that I've had with you already during this conference, that there is that deep part of your soul that has something else calling to it. Maybe it's writing a book. Maybe it's getting up on this stage. Maybe it's taking a new job or making a change in your personal life. And is your yes really on the table? The expanse of what could be in our lives is massive. Yet what we do sometimes is we draw a small box of possibility within that. And here's the thing, I don't think I'm alone. I don't think that I'm the only one who holds back, who plays it safe, who battles with fear, who is afraid to fail, and who is convinced that everyone else is greater than, smarter than, more accomplished than me. We have to walk in to the gifts that we've been given and live the life that we are called to be. Marianne Williamson said this, that our deepest fear is not that we are inadequate, our deepest fear is that we are powerful beyond measure. And it is our light and not our darkness that most frightens us. We have to be mindful of what could be in our lives, because we will often bury it under our greatest hopes and dreams under this guise of busyness. Like, there's just no way, I'm so busy, there's no way I could take anything else on. Under this guise of impossibility. There's no way I'm equipped to do that thing that I'm being called to. When really it's not about ability at all. It's about our fear of the possibility. We have to be brave enough to think about what could be in our lives, and then be bold enough to start taking steps towards that end. One of my favorite thoughts is this one, that we have to decide how much weight to give it. Sometimes when we get paralyzed in this work that we're doing is because we know that the issues that are coming at us are so complex and so difficult, and sometimes don't even have a right answer. And I was really struggling with something in my district, and a colleague said to me this. She said, Jill, you get to decide how much weight to give that. Now, that's not true for all things in matters of life or death, but for so much of this work that we do get to decide how much weight to give it. So sometimes what we really need to do is understand where that issue falls in the overall context of life, and then adjust the weight that we give it accordingly. The last thing that I'd say about acting in the midst of fear is this, that sometimes we just need to take the next best step. I don't know about you, but sometimes I see where I want to be, and I see where I'm at, and I see those clearly. And I get stuck in that canyon between the two. And the challenge for us, especially in this room, if you're like me, is that that bar of where I want to be continues to move as I get continually closer to that bar itself. But contrary to popular belief, big things don't always happen in a leap. They happen when we take that next best step over and over and over again. What's the one thing you can do that will put you on the path to where you want to be? What is the one thing you can be faithful to that's going to put you on the trajectory to where you ultimately want to land? That's what this work is about. This work isn't easy, but man, it is worth it. Take a listen to these words.
Theodore Roosevelt once said, "The credit belongs to the man who is actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood, who knows the great enthusiasms, the great devotions, and spends himself in a worthy cause, who at best, if he wins, knows the thrills of high achievement, and if he fails, at least fails while daring greatly, so that his place shall never be with those cold and timid souls who know neither victory nor defeat."
Who at least fails while daring greatly. This work is hard. It is so hard. But I'll tell you, I would rather be getting my ass kicked in the arena than be standing on the sidelines and watching. The work that we get to do, the impact that we get to have is unbelievable. It is unparalleled. And some days are going to be really hard. But when we are bold, when we choose action, even in the midst of fear, when we lead anyways, that courage is the birth of greatness.